Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member.
Thanks, Ashley, for the introduction. And let's see here. My name again is Shane Humble with Complete Property Maintenance. And today we are going to be going through kind of a general overview of landscaping. And this presentation that has been sanctioned by the state is the Florida Friendly Landscaping. And we're gonna get right into it. Let me just get my screen share here. Let's see, make sure everyone has got this up.
Yep, I can see it. You just gotta hit the, yep.
Okay, are we all good to go?
Perfect, looks great.
All right, perfect. All right, well, thank you and welcome again. This class really is designed in order to kind of do a brief overview of the best practices or best management practices for the landscape industry here in South Florida. We're going to be covering a lot of different topics today in regards to this, and everything from right plant, right place, irrigation, fertilization, some myths, some do's and don'ts. And, we'll try to make this as interactive as possible as we can via Zoom. And I'll look forward to any questions and try to get to them as we go through if possible. If not, I'll save some time at the end to go through them. So all right, without any further delay, let's go ahead and we'll get started here. All right. So this class goes back to some principles that were adopted back in 2004. It was some legislature that was created and directing the Water Management District and the DEP and a bunch of other several interested parties to devise some standards for landscape irrigation and Florida-friendly landscape design. The standards took about 2 years to finally get fully adopted, which took place in December of '06. And anything after this date in regards to landscape permits, planning, zoning, etc., have all adopted these ordinances as of that date. So all right, there are 6 principles that they try to follow in order to, I don't want to say certify a Florida friendly yard, but in order to follow the right guidelines. And they are the right plant in the right place, the use of efficient watering system, using the appropriate fertilization at the right times of year, and then mulching principles, the ability to attract wildlife if necessary. There are some landscapes designed in order to do that. And also the responsible management of pest. And we'll get into that as that's quite a detailed section. And it's probably one of the ones that are the most concerning to the Department of Environmental Protection to make sure that are being followed by your landscaper. So okay, some of these pictures are a little grainy, I should say, but they are just to kind of show a site. So the 6 principles that are integrating the best management practices to minimize environmental impacts, yet meet the clients' and customers' expectations. And it's a difficult balance to achieve because the footprint that a developer has, he wants to utilize to make, I don't want to say the top dollar on his investment, but he's wanting to create the appropriate number of parking spaces, be able to move pedestrian traffic through the site. He's got to make sure that any of the runoff that has now been affected by the change in the structure of the land or the topography needs to be controlled properly, and obviously maximizing his revenue while maintaining a property that's going to be attractive. So what does that typically mean to a development site? So Florida-friendly landscape practices will usually include trees, ornamentals, and a lawn of turf grass or some other type of ground cover. this picture here on the right that you're looking at, we've got a few more slides showing this, but this was a really great study that I did back in around 2008, I believe, 2010, somewhere around there. That was a property that was being developed off of North Lake and I-95. It was a property called Gander Mountain. And this was a brand new property being built after the ordinances had been developed. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But the term Florida friendly refers to native plant material that are well adapted, non-invasive ornamentals, palms, and trees that bring a balance to the beauty through light and shade, the control of wildlife habitat, the reduction of erosion, as well as reducing noise from surrounding communities, as well as modifying the temperature that is created by putting in a large parking lot. So what does right plant, right place? So this is our first principle that we're going to look at. It refers to the plant selection and the location. And after weather, the cultural practices play the biggest role in the success of the agronomic program. And agronomic programs, if you're not familiar with that term, kind of touches on the following: mowing height of the turf that you've selected, the selective pruning of the material that are on site, the application of fertilizers, and as well the use of an irrigation system to supplement Mother Nature. So, all of these components sound different. However, they're definitely undisputedly related. For example, if you wanted to fertilize during a drought period, it's probably going to lead to some very heavy leaching after a strong rain because the ground is hard. It's not very impervious at the time. So yet, as an inadequately fertilized material can lead to thin and weak plants, it'll be more susceptible then to insect and disease. And these weakened plants are not going to have a strong root system, which then further relates to the issues in retaining soil in the root zone, which will lead to the erosion as discussed before and possible water pollution. So as a component, healthy turf here in South Florida is really viewed as an aesthetic asset. And, I think, if you're in an HOA or a condo or whatever it may be, as long as the turf is green, I feel like, the amount of issues that arise are definitely reduced. So one of the ways to keep this erosion from happening or water runoff is definitely by maintaining a significant area of an impervious surface, such as a parking lot and a sidewalk, so that it has places for it to go. And whether that be into a turf bed, planter bed, etc., is obviously going to all be part of the design right from the beginning. So healthy turf will actually reduce the amount of the runoff as it can process greater amounts of rainfall. It's thus going to increase the biodegradation of various organic pollutants, air contamination, and various pesticides that are used. So you'll notice there's a lot of turf in this photo. Maybe had a larger bed coming out into it, but there is a large parking area and shopping center disguised back behind here. So probably has square footage matrix that will offset that runoff. So, okay, here is this is a screenshot of the side of Gander Mountain when it did exist. I think now it's called like Home 2, or it's a new type of home improvement store for like bedding and stuff, I believe now. But so it didn't have a long run. But so this slide is site evaluation and landscape design. A smart design should definitely match the site characteristics with the client's desires or the municipality requirements. A comprehensive site evaluation can help meet these design requirements. And that's why a lot of times you have a landscape architect, a civil engineer to help start off the process before any large development takes place. Excuse me. Some of the things to consider when an engineer is looking at a new site, it is the sun, shade, soil type, pH, soil compaction, slope, drainage, etc. most of the construction activities will lead to, you got to imagine these large pieces of equipment constantly running over the site over and over is going to lead to severe compaction. And a lot of times they've got to bring in non-native soils in order to get the height correct. So all of these different variations can make it very difficult for a successful design. So, all right, plant selection. This is kind of a, right plant, right place theory again. Based on a site evaluation, the plant selected should be suited to the characteristics. Plants serve a particular function, and a good design of this will definitely expose those, to be the best that they can be. They should not only improve the appearance or usefulness by providing shade to a parking area or to reduce heat in any of the impervious areas, which also then can help reduce the cooling costs. This should also be positioned to provide a smooth transition from a structure to a landscape or screening from a roadway and direct the flow of traffic into and on to the property. So I will talk a little bit now about irrigation and what we want to call watering versus irrigation. And I know there's some myths and that there's some talk about, hey, I got to imagine that if it's great to water the plant once a week, it's got to be even better to water it 3 times a week or 5 times a week. And that's not always the case. Plants definitely do not waste water. People do. And most commercial properties have modified their soil and habitat to fit the needs of the site. So in order for the property to receive a certificate of occupancy, they've had to meet the town or the municipality's landscape requirements. In theory, this all sounds great, but one of the factors that does not get considered is the type of the controller that is definitely being used. So here in South Florida, we've got a kind of a neat scenario here. Most of the native plants and trees or grasses require anywhere from around 40 to 55 inches of irrigation per year, which coincidentally is exactly how much rainfall we get on average per year. So the only issue is that it's definitely not spread out evenly over the 12 months. So in some months we need to supplement, and sometimes not at all. Summer months where we get several inches per month, we're definitely not needing to stick on the system unless it's not getting enough rain in between the hot days. One of the things that I will say is it's definitely imperative for an HOA or COA to adopt a smart irrigation system of some kind. Definitely utilizing a weather station, which I do prefer over a soil moisture sensor, but it's better than not having anything. Rain sensors we have found are pretty much non-effective because if you know how a rain sensor works, they're basically a little cup with a cork or a float of some type in the in the catch basin. And what happens is you might, Florida rains, we'll get an hour of a rain, we'll get an inch. That float will come up. It'll, activate the sensor to say, hey, it just rained, don't water right now. But literally in about an hour or two, that rain will have already evaporated based on the humidity levels and the evapotranspiration rates. So what happens, that float drops back down again and allows the irrigation system to turn on. So, let's just say it rains hard 2 a.m. By 4 a.m., it's all gone and the float's gone back down and the irrigation's set to run at 5. It runs. It doesn't know any different. So, but we've come a long way since a rain sensor. We can talk about those a little bit better. But this was a system that was adopted inside of a community called Evergreen up in Palm Beach Gardens. And we had the ability, once installed in this entire system, it reduced the irrigation consumption by over 50%, and never went a day with having the soil or the grass get burned up. So highly effective when they're utilized in the right type of scenario. Right now, they will measure humidity, rainfall, temperature, and can also put in some type of topography if you've got it based on beds, turf, drip zone, and this can be done by zip code, and it'll even further enhance the weather station. All right, so again, let's just talk a little bit further more about irrigation here. So using a proper irrigation system design, installation, management, maintenance will provide many benefits. So for your community, what will it do? It'll save money. It'll use the water more efficiently. And what does that mean? It'll prolong the life of your pumps, of the components within the system. It'll also help create a healthier, drought-resistant and pest-resistant landscape, while at the same time protecting the state's water reserves. Remember, here in Florida, we are sitting on basically a large aquifer, and everything that we do, leaches right down into our water system. So we really do want to keep that in mind. All right, so what are we doing in the landscape? Are we designing for the aesthetics in order to sell homes? Are we designing to keep a sustainable landscape using a lot of natives? And every community is different, and depending on where you're at, kind of dictates that in your in your location. So the main issue that we see in terms of irrigation in an HOA is the lack of division. And what I mean by that is, so everyone likes to beautify their front entrance, typically, 2-3 times a year, we like to put in annuals, right? Well, the interesting thing is that those annuals are typically placed right in front of a sign wall, which has a bed of some shrub of some kind to the sides or behind it. And then we've got typically turf grass right in front of that, which all looks great. However, what we've noticed is that there is a failure on the design side by the architects prior to the communities being developed, in that they do not divide up these irrigation zones. And what I mean by that is, we'll have the turf grass there with a rotor, and then we'll have the beds with a spray zone. But what we don't have is a separate line for the annuals that almost every community likes to add at some point for color. Now, if we had that separate zone, we could literally just isolate that one and run the irrigation for the annuals that need that additional watering, for the 3-4 months that they're going to be in the ground. What happens is we end up running the grass zone or the bed zone in order to get it, and we flood those areas. So unfortunately, it's usually a poor design from the beginning, but it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. We also do notice that at a 0 lot line home community, there are irrigation heads placed in between the two homes that typically get no sun. The grass really struggles to survive in these areas, and a lot of times communities will end up rocking those and capping off the irrigation heads because it just turns into a kind of like a mud slip and slide down there. So north side of homes typically don't need water just because of the lack of sunlight. And we've already talked about breaking out the annual beds. So, all right. So, I see we've got a couple of, I'm just looking at questions here just so I don't, I will definitely get back to Charlie and Octavio. I'll keep going here, and I'll get some responses to those answers for you about those irrigation systems. Here, let me just take one back here. We'll talk about fertilization. All right, so there is a component that we do talk about, and I don't know that it's fully understood even in the industry. But thank goodness, going back now about 6 to 8 years, the industry finally decided to make the qualifications of the people that are applying fertilizer a little bit more stringent. So I personally sit on the board of directors through the Florida Nursery Growers Landscape Association, and I was part of the team that put together the background as to what was needed in order to test for this. So I'm a certified judge, and almost all testers that come through, I volunteer to sit on these test sites, and will judge when they come through to apply for their licensing. And that licensing is the BMP. That is a certificate that is now required in order to actually apply fertilizer at your community. And why is that? So We've identified that it's, we have a very, very sandy soil, very, very little nutrition that was found here in South Florida soils. And it's basically because we're so coastal and so close, having our aquifer below us. It's very difficult to maintain a nutrient level in our soil below the root zone. So let's talk a little bit about fertilizer, and then we can get why it's so important. The term fertilizer means any substance that contains one or more recognized plant nutrients and will promote a plant growth or control the soil acidity or the alkalinity, and will provide other soil enrichment. And it can also be used to correct certain measures to the soil. The term grade or analysis, which you will find on any bag of fertilizer, contains the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that is guaranteed by the manufacturer to be in that bag of fertilizer. That is actually they are tested, and it is a legal document that's provided on each bag. So per law, what needs to be contained on that label of fertilizer is the brand and the grade, the manufacturer's name, their address, the guaranteed analysis, which is all the percentage rates of what's in the bag, and then the source for your secondary nutrients and the net weight. And why is all of that important? Well, so these are very expensive materials that are not only being mined and processed in order to get into this bag, but that 40 or 50 pound bag of fertilizer that you're purchasing has to guarantee those products, because each particular item that you're using it for to put down on, whether it be turf or plant, has a need, and you've got to be able to feed that plant appropriately. And you want to make sure that it's not something that's either too high in nitrogen at the wrong time of year. Here in Florida, we are typically not allowed to apply any phosphorus. So most of the times that number in the middle is a 0, depending on the time of year. And you might even have certain municipalities that does not allow any nitrogen to be put down during the summer months, which runs from like May to September. So, and what does that mean? So, you see a grade that says 10, 10, 10. Well, that means that at a minimum, there is a guaranteed weight of that product in each of the bags provided. It's very, very important. And it's very important to, when you're actually applying this fertilizer, that your spreaders are calibrated to meet the bag so that it's getting down the exact amount of product needed per 1,000 square feet of plant material. So some of the solubility of the material. So there's a lot of percentages that you'll also find on the bag. And at one time, 50% used to be a really good, product, which meant that it takes 50% of that product is slow release. And it's either in the form of a sulfur-coated urea or a polymer of some sort, or a carbon. And the higher the water insoluble percentage in the mix, the longer lasting it'll be. So right now there are 90% products, and it's dictated by the price. So it all kind of falls into each other. So typically in the course of a year, St. Augustine turf is going to want around 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot. And that's just what it needs to feed typically. And we can also see if there's anything lacking in the fertilizer by sending off a soil sample to a lab. And I was talking about the BMP. So back in 2014, that was the exact year when that took place. Sorry, excuse me, just getting a drink. All right, and what does it mean? The low rate versus higher rate, and it just depends on the material. You might have some plant materials that are hungrier for your manganese, like certain palm trees, Alexanders, etc., will be off color if they don't have enough magnesium or manganese. All right, so we're fertilizing, and one of the BMPs, one of the kind of principles is what's called a ring of responsibility. And what that means for a applicator is that they are not allowed to apply any type of broadcast spreading of fertilization or fertilizer granules within 10 feet of a water body. So a lot of times you will find that your soil, your turf doesn't look its greatest around a lake bank, and that's for a reason. We do not want the fertilizer, the granules going into that area, because it immediately will just run off into the lake, which then could, cause toxicity to the fish or the actual plants that are growing in the lake or the littorals, etc. So if you're using a drop spreader, you can get a little closer because it's more controlled, but that is what's known as the ring of responsibility. You don't ever want to fertilize new grass. Typically want to wait at least 30 days for that. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term fertigation. That's the act of actually putting fertilizer liquid format into your irrigation system. Definitely can be done, and it's less common because it flushes through your system more quickly. However, it's still an effective method, just not used very often. So, all right, let's see here. We got some questions. I'm going to take a quick a couple of minutes here just to answer a couple of questions. All right, I'm going to start at the top. Let's see. All right, we've got one here from Mike in regards to the lake banks, and yeah, definitely let it. You don't want to let the grass grow much longer than say 30 to 45 days if it is new. Let the root system get deep and try to hold the soil back for erosion. The planting, I'm not familiar about. That would be something that I would have to take a look at in order to better answer that. Yeah, house gutters runoff. That's a tough one. Definitely need to look at that. Does Florida have restrictions regarding landscapers to inform homeowners there before vendor sprays pest? In regards to pests, the day of you are legally required to put out a sign, and I believe it's one sign every. I can't remember if it's 150 feet, just to advise that it's being done. And most products are safe once they're dry. Hopefully that'll answer that one there. St. Augustine grass tending to die every few months. That could be something related to shade or just wasn't installed properly, because St. Augustine grass can last for 30, 40 years. Let's see. Okay, Ayala, I will come back to you about the pest whitefly and weed control when we get down to that section. All right, thank you. Let's move on here. Okay, so mulching. This is one of those topics that is a love-hate topic in communities, and it typically comes down to whether or not it's needed, aesthetically pleasing, what color, what type. So let's talk about a little bit about some facts regarding mulching. So there are different types of products used as a mulch, and it can be anywhere from a hardwood mulch. It can be mulch that is rubber. Some people refer to rocks as mulch. There are pine straw, pine bark chips. We got all different types. So one of the most common benefits of mulch is really to help suppress weeds. Here in South Florida, because we have such obviously hot temperatures and a sandy soil, we have a lot of weed seeds present. The minute that the weed seeds are warmed up and have the ability for the sun to hit them, water to hit them, they will germinate. And one thing for sure is a 2 to 3 inch minimum layer of mulch will help suppress those weeds in the beds for sure. It also will help, prevent the loss of water via the evaporation. It will help also control soil temperature. Typically about 10 to 14, 15 degrees, it will actually lower the soil temperature directly below the mulch. Not using rock. Rock actually raises the soil temperature below and can cause root systems to burn up or, be more thirsty, I should say. So it also will help the, the soil surface from crusting over. It will improve the absorption and the percolation as well. And that mulch will eventually break down and create some organic material, and which will then lead to raising the nutrient content. Sometimes these the plant root systems will actually grow into the mulch and the soil, and it'll have a more robust root system versus a soil that does not have a mulch. And personally, I believe it adds beauty. Everyone's got different interpretation in terms of the color. I've always been a fan of what they call chocolate or black, because it reminds me of a soil and looks more natural. And others like the gold or the red to make the green plant material behind kind of pop a little bit more. So each to their own. All right, let's get into some fun stuff or things we can talk about that we might see. And as a landscaper, when we go through communities, you never know what you're going to see, and we've seen it all. One of the things that are always we struggle with are obstacles in the beds. Here we've got a bunch of gnomes, but at least one of the things why I took this picture was just to show the transition from mulch to grass. It does just create a nice aesthetic change. Okay, what should we do when you've got a bed? What's the call? Mulch, plant, or turf? So a lot of commercial sites, the bed areas will tend to be very narrow in nature. It then creates the choice that needs to be made. And a lot of times turf grass is used just because the economic nature of it. It's just less per square foot, doesn't have to be replaced as often like a mulch. However, a 18-inch or less band of grass will definitely struggle due to the maintenance practices used to cut it. A lot of times that's going to have to be done with a weed eater. It might be close to concrete, so its ability to disperse the heat is not as great. And then what irrigation heads do you use that's covering that 18-inch, thickness? So a lot of times mulch is considered, but it's rejected due just to its requirements to replenish every, 4 to 6 months. A lot of times a shrub or an ornamental grass is definitely the correct choice, but the conditions will definitely dictate. And here's some examples of soil erosion. This is I believe this was a Publix parking lot in Royal Palm. This was an area where, I guess, out of sight, out of mind, but this is where people do park. And you can see when you've got a steep slope and you don't use the right material, your plants are going to die. It's the soil is not going to hold, runoff. So it's going to, push the dirt down below the curb. It's going to be very inorganic, and it's going to be very difficult to maintain as a result. This is that, I think this is a Publix / Home Depot parking area over on Jog and Okeechobee. Some of the issues here, if you notice, the sidewalk is really dark in color. The large trees are shading that area, which is not allowing the water to burn off. It'll stay wet and slippery with fungal growth. And here's a kind of example again of this thin strip of grass here that's going to struggle to live. All right, we'll talk a little bit about mowing. Most properties in South Florida have St. Augustine or Floratam grass. And it's really important. This is a kind of a staple here in Florida. This grass was originally designed by the University of Florida. And it was designed to withstand our heat, our rainfall, etc. It's, it is a heavy eater, but it's also fairly resistant to a lot of different diseases and easy to maintain. It's to be cut at 3.5 to 4 inches in height. It grows by the stolons as well as rhizomes, and it's very, very tough to kill and does very well down here. It impedes stormwater runoff. Any healthy root system is going to ensure that the water and the nutrients are absorbed and not wasted or passed through. If there's fewer weeds, it means there's less need for herbicide. And typically, it requires it to be mowed at around 36 times per year. Anything less becomes very difficult to maintain the grass properly, and you're finding yourself scalping it at certain times because you're not going to be back for 10 days to 2 weeks. But we say anywhere from 36, 39, 40 mows a year is adequate for St. Augustine turf. All right, a couple little myths. A lot of people come from up north and want to tell you that, you're supposed to collect up the grass or you need to aerate it. Here in South Florida, St. Augustine grass, you do not need to take the grass out. It does not need thatched. The grass will, decompose pretty rapidly as it falls down in there, and will then turn into organic matter that will help fertilize the turf even further. So, all right, pruning. Another important maintenance task. It should be part of routine maintenance. Most communities do this once a month, which is sufficient. It'll help, improve the health, reduce the risk of failure of the plant, obviously controls the growth, and depending on what it is, will enhance the fruiting or flowering. We don't see many fruit trees after all the canker here in South Florida. Most communities don't allow them, but maybe flowering. All right, a couple of myths. Cutting the top of your hedge. I don't know if any of you have heard this or you've come across this. And if a landscaper tells you, oh, I'm just going to cut the top, it'll make the bottom thicken up. That is not true. If you could see me now, you would see that I'm bald. And if I thought that would have worked, I would have been shaving my legs a long time ago and hoping that it would fill in at the top or vice versa. So if you want to get the the bottom of your hedge to thicken up, you have got to make interior cuts. Everywhere you make a single cut to a branch, you will get 2 grow off of there. So that is the one way to make a hedge thicken up. However, as they age and the branches become thicker than 1 inch, you may not get that division into 2. So that's something to note. Rocks are not like mulch. Rocks are very different. They do not break down. They do not provide any organic material to the soil. They do not lower the temperature. And if they are not placed on a kind of a liner, a sheet, they will fall into the soil and disappear. So they do need to be put on a fabric of some sort before being installed. Fertilizing at the base of palms. So that does not do anything. If ever, you want to question your landscaper about, hey, did you fertilize this palm? And you go to the base and you're looking for fertilizer there, you should not see it there. If it's there, they have not provided the service that you should be receiving. There is what's called a root shoot ratio that applies to trees and palms. And that is typically that unless it is a brand new installed palm, this is the only exception, a palm that is established will have root systems out to the drip line of those palm fronds. So if the palm frond goes out 7 feet from the trunk of the tree, that is where you will find the feeding roots, and that is where the palm tree should be fertilized. And anything else is just kind of wasted, and it's going to these tiny little hair-like feeders right at the base that's not getting to the cambium of the tree. So that is a myth, and it's wasted if it's found there. Roundup. So we can talk a little bit about Roundup. This is a very popular topic in a lot of communities. It is still deemed safe if applied by label rate by the EPA as of this year. There still has not been any clear links that have been demonstrated as a result of cancer causing agents. I'm not saying it doesn't. However, they have not linked anything to it as of yet. It also becomes inert in the soil. If it hits the ground, it does not have a furthering effect to kill a plant unless it's sprayed directly on top of it. And yes, you can definitely hurt plants and turf with too much water. They will only utilize what they need. So, all right, I'll take just a quick minute here, and I'll look at a couple of questions again. So that way, I'm not moving on too quick. All right, Charlie Palazzo asked the cost of a weather monitor system. Typically, they will be somewhere $1,500 to $2,000 for a weather monitor type clock, up to about 48 zones. It all comes down to the infrastructure that you've got there that may or not make the price go up from there or down. And I will definitely provide more information about the weather sensor. Let's see here if I got a couple other questions. Not much difference in mulch in terms of large or small. It really is just the coverage. You tend to, if you've got larger pieces, you tend to have gaps unless it's put down at a thicker layer. Smaller mulch tends to bind together a little bit better. Let's see here, Kate. If a resident wants to plant fruit trees like lemons, are they considered part of Florida friendly? Oh, citrus is an ongoing one back and forth. That's a question for local municipalities because each one is different. I know, for example, like in Manalapan, they don't allow any citrus of any kind. I think Andrew asked about the palm doesn't have cambium. No, I was talking about a tree there. It is a monocot. You are absolutely correct. Kind of like a lily. Let's see if there's anything else. Nope. Okay, I will move on. All right. So pest control. One of the big topics here is pest control and the responsible management of the pesticides. If you are to manage a lot of the other aspects, mowing correctly, pruning correctly, fertilizing correctly, hopefully it should help alleviate the need for a lot of pesticides. The idea of an I.P.M is just that. It is integrating your best practices on your pest management. And if the right plant and the right place principle is utilized and your agronomic program is utilized, hopefully you can make pesticides become a thing of the past. However, we do know that we live in a tropical climate and there are new pests being introduced and brought into our state every day via shipping, cargo containers, etc. Okay, so I'm going to read this only because it is pretty important and I know it's a lot of large words here, but this is, as a landscape maintenance company, we at CPM, we do everything in-house. So, we're state licensed pest control applicators, state licensed arborists, fertilization, everything, state licensed in irrigation. So we take this one very important because it's probably one of our most controlled as well as looked into aspects of a landscaping company. So the 482, Chapter 482 under the Florida law defines an I.P.M as the selection, integration, and implementation of multiple pest control techniques based on a predictable economic, ecological, and sociological consequences, making the maximum use of naturally occurring pest controls such as your weather, disease, agents, and parasitoids using the various biological, physical, chemical, and habitat modification methods of the control and using artificial controls only as required to make sure that you keep these particular pests from surpassing the intolerable population levels predetermined from an accurate assessment of the pest damage potential and the ecological, sociological, and economical cost of the other control measures. What does that mean? It simply means putting down as little product possible to control the outbreak that you are seeing at your particular property. Simple as that. And they just had a way to make it sound a lot more fancy. So what are some of their license requirements? So here in the landscape field currently, you will not only need your business license, but a local occupational license, a limited certification for your commercial landscape maintenance. If you are actively applying pest controls, you need your pest control business license, as well as a certified operator. If you are providing tree care, you do need to have an arborist license. And there are also separate licenses that are required for anybody on the property that is spraying either herbicide, which is your Roundup or Prosecutor, etc., if they are applying fertilizer or pesticides, and all of those carry their own individual fine if you do not have them. Okay, so how do you know whether or not to apply an I.P.M type strategy versus going straight to chemical? So you need to identify what the key pest or plant is, determine its life cycle. Are you targeting it as an egg, a larva, nymph, pupa, or adult? And by that, if we know that grubs come up typically the middle of March, we know that we can apply either a deep liquid that's going to go down into the soil and stop it before it turns in to the beetle or the grub, whichever stage it may be at. We can target it then. If we are targeting, say, chinch bug, do we want to put down a all-encompassing product prior to alleviate that area if it's really susceptible to chinch? Or do we want to wait till it shows itself and then treat it at the time rather than blanket spray a lawn? So what are some cultural methods or a more biologic? So if we know that a hibiscus is really prone to aphids, we could release ladybugs on them, which is a very safe and easy method. However, there are also predators to the ladybugs, so we have to make sure we hit it at the right time. Again, deciding the most appropriate method based on the stage of where the pest is at. And then after the correct one is chosen, we want to go back and check on the population to see whether or not we have to retreat. A lot of times products need to be put down twice, 10 to 14 days apart, to ensure that any of the egg or larva has not been produced again. All right, let's get into a little bit about what we typically see here in South Florida. We're dealing obviously with management companies and HOAs and condo associations, and a lot of times these landscapes are supplied by the builder, and you kind of get what you get. A lot of times they are meeting what's called a matrix at the particular municipality where it's being built at, and what that means is that each landscape design has to meet a certain code, and that code may be a certain amount of square footage of turf based on the square footage size of the house and the lot. It needs to have a certain number of native plant material. It may require a hardwood and a couple palms or vice versa, but all just depends on, again, which county and what exactly is being built. So one thing you look at is, how is the spacing? Is it tiered? Is the selections appropriate for the house? So it's okay. So let's ask this. There was a community that I reviewed that was part of an Audubon society. And I just wanted to ask whether or not you think this amount of plant material would work in a side yard. So I counted 5 Magnolia DD Blanchards, which here in Florida, they don't get as large as like what they would say up in Georgia, where they'll grow 60, 80 feet tall by 40, 60 wide. Here, they'll typically go 25, 30 by 15 or so. So there was 5 of these in a side yard. There was 4 Montgomery double palms. There was 2 silver bismarcks, 2 oak trees, 3 fishtail palm clusters, 2 traveler palms, a ligustrum, some lady palm clusters, all in the space of about 2,000 square foot. Think that would work? Let's have a look. Here was that side yard. This was the distance of about, I would say, 15 to 18 feet between two homes. It was the zero lot line side of one of the homes, but the other one had all of this planting. And, you know, I didn't even count, there's Ilex shilling, there was variegated ginger, there was so many other things. But do you see what is a result here? There is very weak grass. The plant material, although it is green, was also, all of it is competing against each other, struggling for the light and stretching. So a lot of it was very tall and thin. And but yeah, this is a prime example of something being overplanted in an HOA zero lot line home. Now here, in contrast, was across the street in the same community. And here's one where, you know, the landscape was, and you can see the house on the right, it's about the same distance, 15 to 18 feet across, where they left it open for the grass to get plenty of sunlight. The shrubs were shaped much better, and the trees were thinned out and the palms were pruned when appropriate to allow sunlight to get through. Just definitely a much better scenario compared to the neighbor across the street. This is a community which, very shocking, is Frenchman's Reserve. And I take this shot because, you know, I don't know if anybody would really want to park on that side of the garage there, or that side of the driveway, but you know, that's a 40 to 50 foot tall royal palm planted literally 2 feet from the driveway. And if anybody's ever seen one of those spikes, they weigh 30 to 40 pounds. So definitely wouldn't want to feel. And then transversely, immediately on the left side of that is a 35, 40 foot tall Italian cypress. Two completely different aesthetics. One being, you know, something from Arizona or California, you know, used to very arid, kind of not, and does not do well in humid kind of situations. And then you've got this tropical royal palm. So very interesting planting choices, but you never know what you're going to get when, you know, or what's on sale when the builders are putting them in. Okay, now we're just going to talk through some of these things that you just might see as you're driving around, and to pay attention to. And you know, a tree stake that's not, the ropes aren't being utilized, the mulch is you know, needing refreshed. Just a poor looking specimen of a tree. Probably not much chance that thing's gonna survive. All right, so we talked about those ordinances that were adopted officially back in 2006. And I'm gonna just show some comparisons of what it looks like before these ordinances were adopted and what it looks like after. This is, if anybody lives in West Palm, this is Okeechobee Boulevard. And, you know, there is not any form of landscape greenery along this street that provides any type of shade, any aesthetic balance. Very, very different footprint when it was basically, you know, okay just to utilize every single square inch for parking and commercial space. Whereas now it's been very different depending on where you go, especially north. Those things, as we develop north, we noticed that those aesthetics started to change. Okay, pardon me. All right, this again is a picture. This is of Gander Mountain, this side of their building. This is just a, you know, a nice transition from a pedestrian walking area from the parking lot towards the entrance. Just nice shading effects, good use of height and balance. I just think it hides the building well, and was a nice touch here. Parking lot area, you know, utilizing large shade trees and different types of grasses, fakahatchee, muley, etc., that are native and allowing, you know, little use of water. This was a very well designed project. This is off of Donald Ross, and as I mentioned, so this is a newer community, like newer development, commercial area. You never guess, but there is a Publix and multiple banks and a McDonald's and all types of shopping, but you would never see it from the main road because of the ordinances that were adopted when this was created. So really, really nice job, very successful design here, in my opinion. Okay, want to talk a little bit about, and actually before I can get into this, let's have a look, see if there's any additional questions here. Okay. Okay, this is a great question here from Diane in regards to turf areas at her HOA. So one of the things I would say is there are a lot of products that can be used pre and post for various weeds. The industry technology has really grown in the sense that they can now target very specific weed species at specific times of year. And, you know, if you wanted to take a long-term approach, you could identify the certain weeds that you have and target them at those certain times of year. Because if you do a blanket treatment that could wipe out 10, 12 weed species, you might find yourself with a lot of open grass areas that can only, obviously in Florida, we don't use seed. So you would almost have to put down, you know, squares to fill in. And, you know, great if your HOA has the budget to do that, then I would say maybe wipe it all out at once and just, you know, resod. But if a lot of times, you know, they don't have the budget to do that. So you can use a pre and post fertilizer that has, you know, herbicides in it that attacks each of the individual weeds. And that will help you slowly reduce their pressure and allow the St. Augustine to grow back in as you do that. Let's see here. Let's see. Teresa said that they have a 1 foot wide area to plant St. Augustine grass on the pavement, but it dies off when we suggest which type of grass may be tolerant. Very difficult. St. Augustine really is the best option in that situation. If you were not able to use something like a dwarf muley grass or some other type of ornamental grass that might be used to fill in the bed, or an ornamental peanut, which has a nice little orange flower that you can also use in order to fill in that area as well. So let's see here. How do you identify grass that needs to be replaced or grow back? Right now, this is the best time to test that. So we are in our growth season, and I would think that if you are going to have the best chance to get grass to be stimulated, it's this time of year with a good balance, fertilizer blend like a 24-2-12 for the turf. And allow those stolons to fill in those areas and see how they do. That would be what I would suggest. So, all right, let me get back to, we just have a couple of slides left here, and we'll be wrapping this up for today. So, in Florida itself, there was a study done back in 2010, and it kind of identified the number of jobs, the number of, or the volume of sales that is created within the industry. And here are those results. The top 10 counties by sales were Miami-Dade, Orange County, then Palm Beach, Hillsborough, Broward, et cetera. You can see down the list that had the largest amount of sales that were related to horticulture in Florida. And then the top 10 counties by employment, they almost line up evenly, which, you know, definitely makes sense. There's just a little bit of a change down in the bottom 8, 9, 10. but those are, it's very impressive. The total revenue that the retailers saw that were within the horticulture industry was 15.35 billion a year. And that was back in 2010. And just recently in 2020, the study was just produced within the last year. That number has now grown to $31.4 billion a year just in the landscape industry. And the total number of jobs have increased by almost 60,000 just in the 10-year span of people working within the nursery and landscape industry here in Florida. And you can see the number of jobs created based on the different segments, whether it be nursery, either a landscape firm, garden retail center, or horticultural supplier. You can see those as they relate to there. Last but not least, so here in Florida, what does that mean? So there are broken into different segments. And what are these landscape firms? Are they going after homeowners, apartments, condos, commercial establishments? And that's the sales that they did in 2010. That's 6.4 billion, and the percentage of the total. So you can see 35% of the sales, 36% went basically to HOAs or homeowners within a community. And that's then further broken out into segments of, was it landscape maintenance? Was it installation, design, or other services? And today, I think you'd find that one of the biggest pushes that we have is probably coming down to AstroTurf or synthetic products. People are looking to enhance their backyards. Obviously, COVID was a huge driver for people being at home and maximizing their backyard spaces. So I'm just going to, let's see here. I'm going to back out of the slides for a second. We definitely found that there was a huge shift in what people were doing in their backyards and what they were wanting to have created. And it was more of a little backyard oasis, wanting to, change their landscape design. We found that they were requiring more privacy because backyards were being used more. So we found that, clusia hedges and, large podocarpus were being utilized on side yards. These are some of the changes that we've seen within the industry. I want to thank you for taking the time today to sit with us and go through Florida-friendly landscaping. And I think I've addressed a lot of the questions, but I'll be happy to stay on for a few more minutes, and I can answer any privately. And I see there's a couple of people asking me to reach out privately, which I will do. So thank you very much again. And I appreciate you spending your afternoon with me to do Florida-friendly landscaping. Ashley, I think you're muted. I don't know if it's just to me.
Thanks for catching me. I said a mouthful and I didn't even realize I was muted. So thank you, Shane, for doing the course for us. And thank you everybody who came. I did just launch a survey, a poll, if you can take that. It should pop up automatically, 3 questions just to get your feedback on how we did today. Shane, if you want to stand here for a few more minutes and answer any questions, you can. I'm going to leave it open just so you know if anybody needs to take the survey. I am going to be sending out everything afterward. And for this course, normally we don't handle it, but for this course, we will be submitting the credits to the DBPR. So we will handle that. If you attended, I have the attendee list, so I'll see the whole thing. And I think that's it. So thank you so much for coming. And I will leave it open just for a little bit there so you can take the poll. And Shane, if you want to answer some more questions.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, Teresa asks, suggests 2 types of shrubs that grows tall fast. So the kind of the trendy shrub right now is clusia. That's being used for hedging material, privacy, etc. great color, nice leaf structure. The one thing we do not know right now with that is we've not encountered Clusia with a hard frost, so we don't know if that leaf, which is it's very heavy with water. It's got a very thick, dense leaf to it, will freeze and crack and fall off. But if you were looking for a good kind of more native, such as a green tip cocoa plum or red tip, once it's established, it does grow very quick. Podocarpus is a little bit of a slower grower, but needs full sun. Then we've got firebush, which can grow extremely fast, but can be a little bit wild. So hopefully those are a little couple of options there for you. And then let's see here. Sand spurs. You know what? I'm not sure about the lime in regard to those. That I would have to find out, Thomas. I haven't heard of that used, and only because a lot of times we don't want to add too much lime to our soils because of how it changes the pH level, which can then affect everything around it. So I tend not to use that. Necessary to change your block irrigation to rooter. Yeah, if you have the ability to change away from rotors, if you are using it for annuals or something else, great. Definitely, you don't want to have mixed irrigation rates on the same zone. You can't have rotors with mist heads, as it will not properly, adequately irrigate the area. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, Octavia was asking about mulching. Nope, you're fine in the winter to use it. Our temperatures don't typically get low enough that becomes an issue. Okay, I think that's everything. I think we tackled all of these. So again, I thank you very much for joining us today, and I look forward to the next class. All right. Okay, sorry, Laura has one down here. What type of shrub or plant can be utilized in a low sun area, shade from a building? We have found that green arbicola does very well in this situation if you're looking for a good shrub, looking for something maybe a little bit more colorful. There are many varieties of crotons that will do well. Arbicola trinette can do okay if you're in a low sunlight situation. I find those ones tend to be the best. No, I have not found anything yet that repels iguanas effectively. It is a very difficult situation with the iguanas. We have found that they might be colorblind, funny enough. When we have planted annuals, for some reason, they have not eaten the white. So I don't know if there's some way to trick them and feed them a poisonous plant, but as of right now, we haven't found anything effective other than a sharpshooter. And a lot of communities seem to have hired those recently. So Pam Taylor asking about ficus hedges. More recently, we have found that the typical whitefly treatments have become ineffective, as if they've almost figured out, or evolved in terms of what the products are. And we've had to kind of up our game and add some different products into our mix in order to be more effective on killing whitefly. And Pam, I can definitely reach out. I know the community you're in, and we can talk about that and see if we can't help you there. Tree bubblers have two settings. Okay, this is from Kim, and finding out if they're set correctly. I am not familiar with the bubbler that has a setting. A lot of times they're just a dial, and they go from closed to fully open, and you try to find the middle ground. I guess the only way really that you would know is having the zone run, and you could see what's being emitted at the time. So I could be more helpful there. Yes, there is a slideshow available. I am emailing that to Ashley, and she'll have it available for you. So, okay, I think that's everything. And again, thank you all. I am signing off. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.